just a little bit behind, about on Chavchet Amud Bet. Amar Shmuel. It's about 10 lines before the lines get wide. The line starts with the word, actually, no, the line before that. Ve'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. So it starts with the word Yehuda there. So let me just say one thing. We have been discussing, what? I'm sorry? Yeah. Shvut Shetzalo Bobasar, you have that?
Yeah.
What? Yeah. Lo Tzricha, right. Well, that's the line above it. Correct. I mean, yeah, that's the line. Then it's Amar Rav Yehuda, yes. So let me just wrap up what we said yesterday, because it's a very important discussion. We had the whole issue about Rebbe Yehuda, not Rav Yehuda, Rebbe Yehuda, who's of the position that not only can you do things that are directly involved in the food preparation, like making the fire and cooking, but you can even do machshirei ochel nefesh, things that are preparatory, which would basically mean like one stage removed, particularly here, the issue about sharpening knives and doing, fixing an oven, doing things that are preparatory to the food preparation and not directly part of it. And even machshirei ochel nefesh he allows, and as long as it was EFshar lasos ba'od yom, you could not do it the day before, which is an interesting criteria, something we normally expect on a Durabanan, but here it sounds like Deoraita. That Deoraita, if you could have done it the day before, because, meaning based on your time or when the problem appeared and so on, then it is biblically forbidden to do that on Yantiv. But if you could not have done it the day before, then it's biblically allowed. So that is a very significant additional allowance in terms of things relating to food preparation. Now, do we rule like Rebbe Yehuda? The upshot of the Gemara sounds very much like we do rule like Rebbe Yehuda, but you are allowed to do machshirei ochel nefesh that you were EFshar lasos ba'od yom. However, the Gemara a little bit equivocates because of this idea of halacha ve'ein morin kain, that you might not want to publicize this because it is very easy for people to, once you allow this, they'll come to allow cases even when it was possible to have taken care of it the day before. But that's basically the principle of Rebbe Yehuda, and that's basically the psak of the halacha, is that even machshirei ochel nefesh, even preparatory things that you could not have done the day before, you are allowed to do. However, there's one important qualification, and that's what I wanted to end with before we pick up with today's stuff, which is that we had all this discussion in the Gemara about sharpening knives, where sharpening knives is allowed, but you do it in a slightly different way. You don't do it on the classical whetstone. You do it on some other type of a thing, on a basket, on wood, etc. But sharpening knives is allowed, but fixing knives presumably would be a problem. If it's really not able to cut at all, and you make it able to cut, then that would be a problem. So what is that additional problem? What's going on here? So Rashi says, to fix it from not being able to cut at all to being able to cut is too much tircha, too much effort, or maybe uvda dechol, something of that nature. And that's why you need these shinuyim, and that's why there are certain limits. But it's important to note that the Ran and other Rishonim say differently, and they say that even according to Rebbe Yehuda, that you can do machshirei ochel nefesh, you cannot do it to make a kli from scratch. You cannot basically say, oh, well, I don't have any knives. Let me go and I'll make molten metal, and I'll pour it into a mold, and I'll make a knife on Yantiv. Right? That you can't do. You can fix something that's been dulled, but you cannot make something what's considered to be making it from scratch. Even that Rebbe Yehuda would limit. And so the cases here, like if it can't cut at all, or the cases of using a classic whetstone or whatever, those would be cases which would get into the category of being like making it from scratch, like making it and not just fixing it. Now, why is that a problem? So what the Ran explains is, he says, it's similar to the reason why you're not allowed to go out to your fields and harvest your wheat and grind your wheat and make flour, right? Why can't you do that? So remember, we've discussed that. Why can't you go and catch fish and hunt on Yantiv? And the basic answer is that things that are not immediately in the context of the cooking, immediately in the context of, sort of getting it from the store and cooking it in your kitchen, that are more long-term, types of issues that are not made in the immediate process of cooking, that is not allowed. That's not in the context of ochel nefesh. So the same way you can't go harvest your wheat, you can grind pepper, but you can't grind wheat into flour, because one is in a context of cooking you do in the kitchen, and the other is in the context of something you do for large scale and long term. So the same is true with your knife. If your knife is dulled, you can sharpen it. But to take something something that's in this category of not being a knife anymore and make it into a knife, well, that's like making things in the factory, and that's something that is not allowed. So bottom line is, and that's a very important distinction, that we basically rule like Reb Yehuda that machshirei ochel nefesh that you could not do the day before are allowed to be done on Yom Tov, although there's an issue about how much you publicize that, halacha ve'imorin kain, but it draws a line at basically like making a kli from scratch, because that would sort of be like going out and harvesting your wheat. So I'll just tell you a practical application of that, which is the question about opening bottle caps. I don't open bottle caps on Shabbos, because we won't go into the whole thing, and it's probably a crazy chumrah at this stage based on what I now know about how plastic bottle caps are made. Okay, but anyway, because there's an opinion that when you make the bottle cap and you break off the ring that surrounds it, you've made it functionally into a kli. Until that point, it could only keep the bottle sealed. But once you break it off, you now make it functional in a new way. Now it can go on and off of the bottle, and it's not just sort of keeping the bottle sealed and can be used in other bottles that it could be before. Fine. Do I open bottles on Yom Tov? And the answer is yes. But because, you can cook on Yom Tov. Of course, this chumrah that I've got of not opening bottle caps, so I'm going to do it on Yom Tov. It's about, being able to drink. And it's really like EF Shalas Sosa Mibod Yom, because we all know that if you open the bottle on Erev Yom Tov, the soda defizzes, right? So anyway, so the question is, though, but I had this whole quandary, like, why am I allowed to do that? Because if we are saying that making a kli from scratch is something that even Reb Yehuda wouldn't allow. Fixing a kli, yes, but making a kli, no. Well, if I think it's making a kli, I think it's making a kli. But I think that, in the end, the idea that the Ran speaks about is this something that's in the natural sort of immediate sense of making the food and using the food and so on, or something that more is like long term, this might technically be an asiyas kli, but it's an asiyas kli that comes in the context of immediate access to the food. So I don't really think that it is, that it would fall into that problematic category, even for those like myself that are machmir and don't open bottle caps on Shabbos. Okay, but that is an interesting issue about machshirei ochel nefesh but not allowing really making a kli from scratch when it becomes completely non-functional and making it functional, that would not be allowed. Let's now pick up with the wrap-up of this, which gets us back to a muktzah discussion. So, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, says Rav Yehuda name of Shmuel, Shavud shetzalu bo basar, if you have a spit that was used to roast meat on Yom Tov, asur l'taltalo b'Yom Tov, you can no longer move it on Yom Tov, because now it's become disgusting. So it's like muktzah machmas mius. So even though before it was completely mutter, now you've made it completely disgusting, and it's muktzah. Rav Bar Ava Amar Rav Malkio Shom to Menicho B'Keren Zaviz. What you'll do is after you take the meat off, you basically just push it off into a corner. Rashi says the word shomto is like maybe you drag it, you don't directly pick it up with your hand, you kick it off into a corner. And even that is only if there's still a kazayas worth, an olive's worth of meat on it, then it's not completely muktzah because of the meat that is still on it. Okay, if that's true, though, you wonder why you have to, as Rashi says, kick it, although again, that aspect of kicking it is not explicit in the Gemara. Ravina Amar, even if it does have no meat on it, you can move it. I agree that it's disgusting, but I'm still giving you an allowance to move it. Why? Like the same way that if you have a dangerous shard, like a nail, a rusty nail in Rishus Harabim, you're allowed to pick it up and move it so that people don't get hurt by it. So here too, you have a spit that's, a sharp piece of metal, you're allowed to move it as well, even if it doesn't have meat on it and even if it's disgusting. Now, you could have also said that if it's really, truly disgusting, it has another allowance. The other allowance of moving muktzah is something called geref shel re'i, which is basically like a bedpan that, if you had the things which basically you use to go to the bathroom in, so that's real muktzah, it's real disgusting. On the other hand, we're supposed to leave it around the house and smell up the house on Shabbos and Yom Tov, so there was a specific allowance to remove it. So the Gemara Gemara could have gone that direction here as well, but maybe it just looks disgusting, but is not actually smelly or something. All right. Amar Rabbi Chiya bar Ashi Amar Rav Huna. Oh, we just did that. Okay. Amar Rav Chinina Braid Rav Ika Shvut Shifchos Uvegumot Rav Malkio. So this idea that you can kick it or move it into a corner was said in the name of Amar Rav Ada bar Ava Amar Rav Malkio. So he said there are three teachings. Basically, there's a Rav Malkio and a Rav Malkia. Okay, and so easy names to get confused. And each of them made sort of three comments on three different cases, and you'll get confused who said which of the, who said which three. So he's going to give you a little way to remember which one said which of these three. So the statements about the shvud, about the spit, that if it gets disgusting, you can still move it to a corner. That's Rav Malkia, as we said. Shvud, where are we? I just lost my place. Shvachot. Shvachot is a case about the Mishnah discusses when a woman gets married based on how much property and slaves that she brings into her marriage, what work she's expected to do around the house. So can there get to be a stage where she has so many maidservants that she doesn't have to do any work in the house? And to which Rav Malkio commented that we rule like, so Rabbi Eliezer says no, even if she's she has all these other maidservants to do work, she shouldn't do nothing, because to have no work to do, what is it, idle hands are the devil's handiwork or whatever. It's not good to be completely to do no work during the day. So and Rav Malkia says we rule like Rabbi Eliezer. So the ruling like Rabbi Eliezer in that Mishnah, that's Rav Malkio. Shvud Shvachot, I lost my place again. The Gumot. Gumot is a point about if you're looking at pubic hairs, and the pubic hairs are supposed to grow from like little indentations, in the skin is where the hairs grow from. And he says that if you see the indentations, even if you don't see the pubic hairs, you can assume that the pubic hairs were there in terms of determining if somebody is a adult or not, okay, a young boy or girl. So those three statements were said in the name of Rav Malkio. Blorit, which now this is another series of statements. Blorit is a way of cutting hair that would be done particularly in a pagan and avodah zarah way. And there was a discussion about when you get. So Rav Malkia says when you get within 3 finger widths of where the hair would be cut that way, you have to stop cutting. So that's blorit. Efer mikle, which is like ashes, burnt ashes. And here's an issue about you're not allowed to put burnt ashes on a wound because it'll get it'll sort of stain the skin and it'll look like tattooing. And gvina, which is the question about why is it that we're not allowed to eat the cheese made by non-Jews. And that was and Rav Malkia. So all of those were Rav Malkia. Rav Malkia explained them in those 3 statements. Okay, so now you know which 3 are Rav Malkia and which 3 are Rav Malkia. Rav Papa Amar Masnisin v'Masnisa Rav Malkia. No, anything that relates to a Mishnah or Brisa, quoting, explaining it or poskening like a particular opinion, that's Rav Malkia. Shmaitata, anything that's an Amoraic statement, that's Rav Malkio. Okay? Now, how do you remember that? The way to remember it is Masnisin, Malkasa, the Tanaitic statements, the Mishnah and the Brisas, those are the queens, those are like, those are more important, those are the heads, as opposed to the Amoraic statement. Of course, it's so funny, there are 2 names, Malkia, Malkio. How are you supposed to remember that the Mishnah is Rav Malkia? But anyway, I guess Malka, like a queen, and Malkia, I don't know. Anyway, my binayu. Now, what's the difference if you split it up based on Mishnah Brisa versus Amoraic statement? You could be now shvachot, which one you attribute the case about the maidservants to, would switch based on his organization of Mishnah and Brisa. We won't work through the details. Now you know who's Rav Malkio and who's Rav Malkia. Moving on, okay? But that's the end of the discussion about the issue about the spit. But as I said, also the very important discussion of Rabbi Yehuda's position about machshirei ochel nefesh. Next Mishnah. Lo yomardim l'tabach. Now we get back to purchasing, and the rest of this parak will be focused on exactly this issue that we've introduced, which is ways of purchasing the foods that you need on Yontiv if you did not take care of it from before Yontiv, but in a way that's not a problem of uvda d'chol, or too much of a sense of commerce and purchase. The person should not say to a butcher, "Shkoli b'dinar basar," give me $1 worth of meat or $10 worth of meat. You don't pay him the money, but don't describe the amount of meat you want in terms of how much it costs. that's too much like purchasing on Yontif. He shechs it and he gives you a portion and you'll work it out afterwards. Now that's not so helpful. What do you mean you give a portion? How much do you figure out how much you're going to owe him? So that's what the Gemara asks. Hey Chiyavid, what do you do? He had the Besura, like in Surah, top of Chav Tet Amud Aleph, Amri, Tarmata Upalgu Tarmat Tarta. They speak about a particular cut, and they'll call it like the cut. Rashi says these are very well identified cuts of the meat. It's interesting because I wonder if you could have said that these are also like weights or sizes, but Rashi says these are cuts of the meat, like this. Like the flank, or rib. So in Surah, they'll describe it as a tarta or a half a tarta. In Narsh, Amri chalka upalgu chalka. Rashi says this is describing the same cut of meat. They'll call it like a chelek or half a chelek. But Pumbedisa Ami Uzia Upalgu Uzia, or an Uzia or half an Uzia is what they call it in Pumbedisa. Benar Pakod, B'masa Machasya Ami Riva Palgu Riva. So again, these are different ways of describing all the same thing. What is that thing? Again, Rashi says we're talking about very specific types of cuts of meat. And then afterwards, you'll figure out how much of that cut of meat, presumably also there's a predefined size, weight to that meat, like, which is why I thought that it maybe meant more of a measure than of a cut. I don't know. Did they say in the Steinsaltz or in the article any other suggestion, like whether it means, whether these things are weights or measures, or whether they're actually? Rashi says it's like a cut, like a rib, like a standard cut. So he just quotes Rashi. Yeah, I don't know if Steinsaltz. Does Steinsaltz quote anything interesting from the Aramaic or any other possible read? Anyway, it's either a standard cut or it's a standard size. So, but you do not talk about give me X amount dollars worth of meat. Now we finish this up with this next Mishnah, which is similar type of a discussion. Okay, and the next two Mishnayot, the rest of the parak, will be a similar discussion. A person can say to his friend, now you're not going to the storekeeper, you're going to your friend, but you still want to, when you go to your friend and you say, can I have I need 2 eggs. So sometimes, I think most of us nowadays, you give them 2 eggs, you don't expect to get it back. But, there are times when people don't, can't afford that. So sure, I'll be happy to give you 2 eggs, but I'm expecting to get the eggs back afterwards. So now you're going to your friend for some food on Yontiv, but you're going to have to give it back. How do you determine how much they've given you? So 2 eggs is easy, but how about flour? So you'd say, could I have a cup of flour? Well, are you allowed to measure a cup of flour? You're not allowed to measure on Yontiv, right? On Shabbos and Yontiv, you're not allowed to do medida, measurement. Okay, and also, measurement in general is forbidden, even if measuring your own flour. And number 2 is, in getting it from your friend, does that also make it too much, again, like a type of a mekach or memkar, when you're being very specific about the amounts? So there's just measurement in general, and B, the transactionary nature of this. So let's take a look. Omer Adam L'Chaveiro, you can say to your friend, Maleli Klizeh, fill up for me this vessel of flour on Yontiv, and implicitly I'll pay you back after Yontiv. Low b'midah, but you cannot have a specific quantity, meaning you can't say I want a cup of flour, but you can bring over something and say fill this up for me. Reb Yehuda Omer, im haya kli shel midah lo yimla'enu. If it was a vessel used for measurement, you should not fill it up. Now that sounds exactly like we said a minute ago. So the Gemara will try to understand what subtle difference there is between the first statement and Rebbe Yehuda's statement. Ma'aseh be'Abba Shaul ben Botnis. There's a story of Abba Shaul ben Botnis. Shahaya mimalei midotav me'erev Yom Tov v'nostam lukucho b'Yom Tov. So here, apparently, he wasn't just like a neighbor; he was actually a storekeeper, and he would fill up, a cup worth of flours or whatever it was, a gallon's worth of wine or whatever the measurement was before Yom Tov. So all the measuring would be done before Yontif. And then somebody came to the store and they wanted a bar of flour. He gave them a cup, right? But it had already been pre-measured before Yontif, or he gave them a bottle of wine is too easy, but whatever. He gave them a container of wine, but it had already been pre-measured before Yontif. And then, again, they would pay back afterwards. Abba Shaul says, again, this presumably is different, not the Abba Shaul ben Botnis. He would do it even on Chol HaMoed because that you would pre-measure from the night before because of the Beirurei Midos, which means sort of the imprecision of the measuring, because when you pour, let's say, wine, it bubbles, and if you wait for it to settle, you'll get a much more precise measure. So he would measure from the night before, even if it wasn't Yom Yantav, even on Chol HaMoed, because he wants to make sure that he's giving the people exactly the amount that they had asked for, so he wanted to wait for it to settle. Now the question is, what does that have to do with Chol HaMoed? So let's take, which is the next statement in the Gemara. And Chachamim would say, even in a weekday, you should measure things out from the day before, because of Mitzui Midos, which is a similar idea to Beirurei Midos. Rashi says the difference is, one is, like I said, if you're measuring, let's say, wine, there are like airs and bubbles and you want to wait for it to settle. The other is if you're measuring oil, so it'll maybe, you have your container has exactly the right amount of oil in it. It's got whatever it is, one, what would you say, ounce or whatever of oil. But then when you want to pour it into the other person's, vessel, it's going to take like an hour for all of the oil to come out. So he said what you should do is the night before, if you really want to be honest, if somebody's going to buy, wants to buy from you a cup of oil, you say, leave your vessel over and you'll come back tomorrow and pick it up. And then you turn, your pre-measured amount in and you wait the whole night for it to slowly drip out. So you give him exactly what he was purchasing. Okay, now why exactly, if those are the concerns of the last two statements, why exactly it mentions Chol HaMoed is not clear now, but it'll be clarified, right? Obviously then it should be even in the weekday, which is the last statement. So that'll be clarified in the Gemara. Let's take a look in the Gemara. My avalo b'mido. What is this debate between the Tanna Kama, who says you cannot borrow with measurement, and Rabbi Yehuda says if it's a vessel used for measuring, don't fill it. Sounds like the exact same. So my avalo b'mido. What does it mean not to measure, according to the Tanna Kama? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel avalo b'kli hamyuchad l'mida. You cannot use a vessel that has been designated and has already been used for measuring, like a measuring cup. But let's say it's a vessel that could become used for that purpose. Like you have something that is, exactly the right size. And if your current measuring cup breaks, you'll have this other vessel, you'll use this as your new measuring cup. But you haven't used it for that yet. Okay, and again, it's not like it's got, marks along the edge, so, it's already, I clearly a measuring cup. It's something that could easily be used as that, but has yet to be used for that. That you can do if it hasn't yet been used for that purpose and it's not yet identified as such. The Asa Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda is coming along and say, you can't even use a vessel that would eventually serve that purpose. That's already too much like measuring and too much like type of uvda decho, especially maybe for yourself you can do it, but not when you're borrowing from your friend. That's already too clearly defining how much, the exact amount that you're borrowing, and that's too much like business and transaction. Okay, so that's the debate, whether you can use this vessel that has yet to be used for measuring, but that's how it can serve. Alma says the Gemara, okay, if we frame it that way, what would emerge is Gabi Simchas Yantav, regarding Simchas Yantav. Now it's very nice, the Gemara says this, right? All along, we've had all of these leniencies of ways you can buy food on Yantiv without actually buying it, as long as you're sensitive to uvda d'chol issues. And we've been saying that it's an extension of the way the Torah allows, ochel nefesh, allows you to do things relating to food and cooking or whatever. The rabbis also allow you to do a certain amount of business, purchasing relating to food, as long as you don't do it in a too blatant way and in an uvda d'chol way. So the Gemara here articulates that allowance to do things related to cooking and food by the words Simchas Yom Tov, which, okay, that's pretty obvious, but it's nice to have that type of identification, that that's what it's about, why we want you to be able to cook. And actually, it's worth noting that Ramban says, it's not incidental. Ramban says, why is it that the Torah gives you more allowance on Yom Tov than on Shabbos? Why are you allowed to cook on Yom Tov? Why does the Torah allow you to do that? So maybe you could say, well, Shabbos is so holy, it's whatever, it's Maisa Brachos and so on. It has higher degree of holiness, and that means more things are forbidden. But the Ramban says, well, the reason that the specific allowance on Yom Tov is around areas of cooking is because of Simchas Yom Tov. Since the idea of Simcha is central to Yom Tov, Vayisach Sameach, right, and that's not a central idea by Shabbos, so the Torah wants to make it as possible possible give you as much opportunity to have that joy, which means making it easier for me to cook and prepare food on Yantiv itself. So it's interesting to note that idea of Simchas Yantiv as an allowance for food preparation is what the Ramban says is behind why the Torah allows you to prepare food on Yantiv. And here the Gemara is using that phrase of Simchas Yantiv to explain why you're allowed to do certain degree of purchasing of food. Okay, so let's keep on going. But again, so that's just key to the way the Gemara frames it is by that word Simchas Yantiv. Almost says the Gemara, you see that Gabe Simchas Yantiv, Reb Yehuda l'chomra, Reb Yehuda, even though it's an issue of getting food on Yantiv and a type of buying food, and it's about Simchas Yantiv, Reb Yehuda is going to be a little bit stricter. He won't let you use a vessel, even if it has yet to be used as a measuring vessel. Reb Yehuda will be strict, Rabbanan l'kulam, the rabbis will be lenient. So the Gemara says, 1 minute. We just heard in an earlier Mishnah that the reverse. The Mishnah teaches Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shokolad and Basar Keneged HaKli Keneged HaKupitz, that if you come to getting meat from the butcher, Rabbi Yehuda allows you to use the balance scale. If on the other side you don't put fixed weights, but you put like a hatchet or some other vessel. You can't use the balance at all. So there it's the opposite. Same type of a concern. How can you get food on Yantiv? And Rabbi Yehuda is more lenient, gives you more latitude, and the rabbis are more strict. So the Gemara says, Alma Rabbi Yehuda l'kula v'Rabbanan l'chorma. So there we see that Rabbi Yehuda was more lenient in terms of getting food on Yantiv, and the rabbis were strict. Kashid Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda, Kashid Rabbanan Rabbanan. So it's a contradiction of both of their positions. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda lo kasha. Rabbi Yehuda is not contradicting himself. Hassam, over there when it comes to using the balance scale, b'she'ena omeid lemida. At the end of the day, if you're using a hatchet on your balance scale, that's something that clearly is never used in the context of measuring. And therefore, that makes that whole transaction to be bizarre and not about a normal way of purchasing.
Well, the scale
but
itself.
The scale itself, you would say, is counterbalanced, is reframed by the use of this vessel that is so bizarre. Okay. But here he says, but omei lamida. But here, the vessel is something that would normally be used. Maybe you haven't used it yet, but it's the normal type of a vessel that would be used when you measure and when you purchase. So there's nothing sort of visual, and obvious about the transaction here that makes it look different from the normal way you would do a transaction, because you're using a type of a vessel that you would normally use. There, you're using a hatchet to weigh on a scale. It's clearly a different type of a thing. So that's why he could switch his position. The rabbis are also not difficult. There, you are doing like you do during the weekday, and Rashi says, like you were saying, Dov, that you're using a scale. The very use of the scale makes it clear that this is an act of measuring, whatever you put on the other side of the scale. And here you're not doing it because you're not using something. So on the one hand, you're using a hatchet there, but you're also using a scale, and the scale is clearly earmarked for type of transaction purposes. It's a business object. Whereas here, you're using an object that has yet to be used in the context of sale. It's not yet been put to that type of use, so therefore it is going to be allowed, which basically means, and it's an important point, we sometimes tend to oversimplify and say, oh, so-and-so is a makil, he's very lenient, don't go, or this person's a big machmir in terms of psach. But, sometimes it's not about being makil or being machmir. It's about these particulars of the case. I'll look at one case, and the specific particulars are going to tell me, I don't think you can do that on Yantiv. And I'll look at another, and it's all about, buying and going and getting something from the store, but the exact particulars to me may seem like it's too weekday, makes it too much like a weekday activity. Another case, I'll make a judgment that'll be stricter than somebody else, because in my judgment, this other case makes it too much like a weekday activity. Somebody else doesn't think that, but I do think that. So you can really have different positions on cases based on the circumstances, and you're not generally across the board makil or machmir. Like some people think like the Chazon Ish, he's a big machmir, he's machmir and everything. I can show you dozens of cases where the Chazon Ish is makil, because that's just the way he reads the sugya, and it comes up to a more lenient position than other people read it, but each case deserves its own judgment. Yes.
I want to go back to that Ramban for a moment. Is there a conceptual difference between Simchat Yom Tov and Oneg Shabbos?
Yes. So oneg is much more. It's a good point. Oneg. First of all, oneg is from the Nevi'im. It's not in the Torah. Okay, so obviously it wouldn't factor in to have that same degree of weight. Simcha's in the Torah. Oneg is more about physical pleasure. Simcha, joy, is different. Like, the Gemara first said that the true simcha is bringing korbanot, but it's a more, a state of elation, and it's not just the reality of pleasure. That possibly is the issue here. I mean, why does cooking on Yom Tov bring more simcha? So it could just mean that the food is fresher. You don't have to cook it before and then keep it on the warming plate. You could, eat fresher, and then you are right. It's more of an issue of oneg than it is of simcha. It's more pleasurable. That's true. But it also could be just giving me that allowance, that freedom, to type of cook or whatever. Just makes the day more about enjoying myself and more about like simcha than it does about, so it does more than just increase the sensory, pleasure that's involved. But it's a good point, that oneg is also a relevant factor to food. It's a pretty directly relevant factor to food. Okay, so let's now continue. Okay, so that's one way of reading it, whether it's a vessel that's been used for this purpose or not, and they might reverse their position or their leniencies and stringencies because of the specifics of the case. Rava says, my aval b'mida. What does this mean in the Mishnah? Don't use it with measure. So Rava says what I think is probably an easier read of the Mishnah. Shelo yizkar lo she'mida. That it's not talking about what vessel you're using. Don't go to your friend and say, can I please have 3 ounces, a half a cup of flour? Don't explicitly mention the measure amount. Okay, like before we said don't measure the money to give me $2 worth of meat. Here, would seem less of a problem, but don't mention the exact measurement. Give me a half a cup of flour. That's what the Chachamim are saying. But you could actually use a vessel that is designated for it. So I can go with my measuring cup, right, from my kitchen, which clearly is a cup's worth of flour, right? And I could go with, or one of those just individual things that's a cup. And I go, could you please fill this up for me? That's okay. You could use a measuring cup, but you can't say, I need a cup of flour. Okay, that's what Rava says. In one way, it's more obvious that you are being precise and measuring than the other way. That's what the Tanna Kama says. The Asa Reb Yehuda, and then Reb Yehuda is going to be more strict, and he's saying because this makes sense. Because Reb Yehuda specifically emphasizes the vessel. Don't fill up a measuring vessel. So for him, even if you don't say I need a cup of flour, if you're bringing over a measuring cup, then you can't fill it up. Now the Gemara is going to go through the exact same thing. Now according to your read, Rabbi Yehuda is being strict, even though it's about enjoying Yom Tov, getting food for Yom Tov. Rabbi Yehuda l'chom, Rav Rabban l'kula, because Rabbi Yehuda won't even allow you to use the measuring cup even without mentioning the amount. So we heard the opposite. That non-Reb Yehuda omer shokolad and basar connected a kli or connected a kupit. You're allowed to weigh meat on a scale against a vessel or against some type of a hatchet. The chamim omim eimash libakaf mazan kolika. You can't use the scale at all. Alma, you see, when it comes to getting to getting food for Yom Tov, Reb Yehuda l'kulav rabban l'chumra. Reb Yehuda is lenient and the rabbis are strict. The opposite of what you said here. Kasha Reb Yehuda, kasha rabbanan. So they're contradicting themselves in one Mishnah to the next. So the Gemara says, Reb Yehuda lo kasha. No, Reb Yehuda is not contradicting himself. One case strict, one case lenient. It's not a contradiction. Like we said before, when you use the hatchet on the scale, you're using something that is never used in the context of measuring. So therefore, it clearly makes it a not normal transaction and a non-business type of transaction. Here, even if you don't say a cup of flour, you're giving the person a measuring cup. So it looks like a normal type of a transaction. So here we're going to be more strict. The rabbis go the reverse. There you're using a scale, which is very much a business type of of an instrument, and therefore it feels very much like a weekday activity. Here, even though you're giving somebody your measuring cup, it doesn't make it like this weekday business activity. Why not? People will bring over a wine in a measuring cup and they'll drink it. Like I know, I want to go over to your house and I want to bring over some wine and we're going to drink together, and I'll bring it over, not in a bottle, but I'll bring it over in a vessel that I would normally use for measuring. Sometimes those things do double duty, right? So since I sometimes will bring over something just as a way of conveyance, and I'll use a measuring cup not necessarily as a way of measuring, but sometimes it'll do double duty, and I'll use it as a way of giving something to my friend. Here too, you come to my house, you'd say you'd like some flour. I give you I scoop it up in a measuring cup and I give it to you. It doesn't necessarily look like we're doing a transaction. I gave you exactly a cup of flour and you're going to owe me for it. Maybe it's just a vessel that I use to give you something. Okay, but if I say, here's a cup of flour, I explicitly label it, that makes it already like a transaction. Okay, so again, it's clear that the issue here is we allow something that implicitly is going to be paid back and is going to be purchased afterwards, but we can't too obviously label it as a type of a transaction and business exchange on Yontif. And exactly what particulars will mean that is it used about explicitly labeling something or visually something being different and so on. That's somewhat of what's being debated between Rebbe Yehuda and the Rabbanan. Okay, let's take a look now with this other issue, which gets us away from the Yontif concerns. Ma'asav Abba Shaul ben Botnis. So first, Abba Shaul ben Botnis would fill up his vessels of wine and flour, whatever, before Yontif, at the exact amount. Somebody would come to borrow. He'd give them the vessel. He'd know exactly how much without necessarily doing any of the measuring on Yontif or mentioning any names of measuring. Any names of measurement. Tana, so the Gemara moves beyond that and gets to now the non-Yontif aspects. Af b'moed osakain, he would even do this on the moed, b'nei bitul beis hamedrash, because it would lead, he didn't want to be out of the beis medrash. So on Chol HaMoed, he had more time to be sitting and learning, and other people had more time, and they would be asking him shilos, and he wanted to be very free for people in terms of learning. So if people, but he also had to run a store. Like they tell the stories about the Chavetz Chaim, right? He had like this store. So what he would do is, he would use nighttime when people weren't asking him learning questions to get everything ready in the store and to pre-fill up all the measurements. So if anybody wanted something, he'd have it ready to give to them, and he wouldn't have to waste time, and he could spend his time during the day in the beis medrash and doing the learning. Okay, so that's why he mentioned specifically Chol HaMoed, and according to this, it wasn't an issue of not cheating people and having the exact amount, but it was the issue of just not wasting time during the day. It sounds also that it's saying that the Abba Shaul of the Mishnah, who said the second statement, Af b'moed osakain, is the same as the Abba Shaul ben Botnis. I don't know. I didn't get a chance to look it up, but it seems reasonable that we're saying it's the same one. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this: Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis taught, who kanas sholosh meos garve yayin mibeirurei midos. And now we're going to see that there is an issue here, not just about having time to learn on Yontif, but also not cheating people. It says what he would do is after he measured out for people the wine, there would be a little bit that would be the difference. Like again, if I pour you if I pour into your vessel, and your vessel has marks, let's say at the 1 liter mark, and I pour wine into your vessel, it's going to hit the 1 liter mark right now. But if we wait 5 minutes for it to settle, it'll be a little bit less. Okay, but normally in the business, nobody has that time. We're not waiting 5 minutes. Presumably, you're mochel. You fill it up. Of course, when you all get, I don't know about you, me. When I go to get soda at the, from the fountain, right at the movie theater, wherever it is, you wait. Give it a minute to settle, then fill it up some more, right? But anyway, here, presumably it wasn't, the wine's a lot more expensive than soda, but anyway, presumably it wasn't that big of a difference, and people wouldn't want to wait, so he understood they would be mochel, but I would fill up your thing, and in the end, there'd be extra left over in my vessel, because I hadn't really fully filled it up, because it looked like it was full, but it wasn't full. And by the end of the year, he had collected, again, this is an exaggeration, 300 barrels of wine, or whatever, 300 flasks of wine from the leftover wine that people, that he did not fill up of people's measure. It's sort of like, the whole issue about the rounding error in banks. What happens when the bank figures out your interest and it's less than a penny? Who gets that less than a penny? So the bank would always keep it for themselves. And then this was a whole story, whatever, somebody, computer programmer who was working for the banks basically found a way to funnel that money into his own Swiss bank account, and every person's little half penny over every time the bank computed the interest turned into millions of dollars. Okay, so that's what happened here. Everybody's little half penny that he didn't fill up the exact amount, in the end it was 300 barrels or flasks worth of wine. Again, it's probably an exaggeration, but let's take a look at how it goes on. The Chaverav, Kinsu Sholosh Meos Garbe Shemen Mimitri Midos. And as I said, the other problem is if you're giving oil, you pour it out, but like you'd have to wait all like hours for all the oil to come out of the measuring vessel. So I have an exact liter of oil here. I'm going to pour it into your vessel. We're not going to sit around waiting all day for it all to come out. Okay, so there's going to be some that I'm going to keep to myself at the end. And by the end of a year or a few years, there was 300, flasks of oil left over that I had because I didn't give it to the people, technically it really was deserving to them. So what did they do with this? They felt guilty about it. So they, rather than moving it into a Swiss bank account, what did they do? They brought it to the officers of the temple in Yerushalayim. And Amrulem, they said, because they wanted to give it away. They didn't want to keep it to themselves. So Amrulahem, so these officers, the treasurers said to them, yeah, you're being very firm, but there's no need. Like people are mochel, it's all understood. Amrulahem, so they said back to the treasurers, it's very nice that you say we're not responsible, but we don't want to keep it. It doesn't belong to us. So Amr Lahem, that's very fun, interesting, that phrase. I don't know how often that occurs in Chazal. Since you're being stringent on yourselves, you shouldn't use it for the temple. It doesn't sound, I'll give it to tzedakah. That's it. I did this thing wrong, I'll give it to tzedakah. It's not about tzedakah, it's about giving it back to the people. So you're not obligated, but if you want to give it back to the people, find a way to give back to the people, not to give it to the Beis HaMikdash. Titania, we turn a brisa. Nobody's saying they stole here, but this is being used as the model. If somebody stole and he doesn't know who he stole from, don't say, I'll just give it back to tzedakah. Because tzedakah isn't the person you stole from. So Yasem Be'tzarchei Rabin. You should use the money for communal goods, communal purposes. So ultimately you'll be benefiting some of the people that you took it from. My Nihu, what is that? Amarav Chizda, Boris Shichinu Ma'oros. You dig wells, everybody needs good water wells, so use the money towards the digging of wells. Okay, so that's what they said. You should give this money to some communal purpose and don't give it towards the Beis HaMikdash. If you're feeling guilty about it, then do something more appropriate with it. Dov, you had a question before.
Sure, I have two short things. One is it's really common when you go like in the shuk, when you buy something in bulk, the guy measures it out for you, and he takes a little extra scoop and he throws it in.
Because of that.
Because it is.
Yeah.
Also, is that the phrase Benot Yisrael, Hechmir al Atzmam,
right.
is similar, right? In other words,
right, so that is Hechmartem al Atzmechem and Hechmir al Atzmam, right, does come up. Thank you, yes, it does come up there as well, correct. Okay, so now the Gemara goes on. Adrei Rav Chizda l'Ravna Ukva. So Rav Chizda took Ravna Ukva, the Darash, and he expounded, meaning he presumably used Ravna Ukva as his loudspeaker, and he expounded. Lo yimdod adam sa'orim v'yitin lifnei behem b'yontav. Now we're back to Yontav concerns, measuring. So the same way you can't measure in general on Shabbos and Yontav, and certainly there's even more problems when you're borrowing it from a friend because then it's more like transaction. So now we're going to talk about you measuring out your dog food or your food for your animal. Is that also a problem of measuring? He says, yes, it is. You're still measuring. So again, remember, two problems of measuring. One is in a transactionary context where it's more problematic, and the other is to do it even by yourself, and there's a prohibition of medida because it relates to business, even between you and yourself. So lo yimdod adam sa'orim v'yitin lifnei behem tov. Don't measure out an exact amount of barley and give it to your animal b'yom tov. Avol koder hu kavo kavayim b'nosim lifnei behem tov. But what you can do is you can scoop out a kav or two kavs and give it. So what's the veino choshek? So what's the difference? So Rashi basically says the difference here is that the question is that are you basically, it's one thing that you use a measuring vessel and then you pour into something else. Like this is the box I'm going to give my animal to, and I scoop out a particular amount and I pour into it. Then I'm like measuring, using this to measure, right? Because then I'm using it to measure and then I'm putting it in the container that I'm going to give to my animal. But if you scoop out, it's sort of like using the cup and going and saying, can you fill this up for me like we had before, right? If you use the thing itself to convey the thing to the animal and to present it to the animal and you're scooping out with the thing itself and you're not pouring it into something else, that would be okay. All right? So let's take a look. Ve'eno choshesh. V'anachtom, a baker, modei tavlin v'nosein toch de'rasa. So now it's fascinating. Some people will actually do give an allowance to measure, because anybody who knows, cooking is a much more inexact type of a practice than baking. Baking, the measurements have to be extremely precise. And also, I was just, they want you to use weights and not volume, because weighing things is much more precise. So if you have a baker, they actually allowed him to measure out the spices. Today, shelo yaktiach tavshila. In order that his, now it's funny though, because it says kedera and tavshila, which has to do more with a stew than it has to do with a nachtom, however, is a baker. So I don't exactly get, and tavlin is more that used for a stew. But anyway, somebody that is a professional cook, they did allow a certain amount of measuring of the spices, which raises a question. So does that mean if I'm making something at home on Yontif, I can measure out a teaspoon, a tablespoon? Is that part of the Isser Medid or not part? Who falls into the category here of nachtom? Not very clear. From here, it sounds like it's only in a professional context. Okay, Rashi says, Mevashel kederos nami kari nachtom. Nachtom is not only a baker, it's even somebody that's making it, but it still sounds that somebody is in a professional context. So not exactly clear what the degree of allowance is. Amar Rab Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amar Rav, Modedes isha kemach b'yom tov v'notenes l'toch isasa, kedei shetito chala be'ein yafeh. That a woman can measure the exact amount of flour on Yontif that she's using to make her dough, so that when she separates out challah, she separates out a generous amount. If she doesn't know exactly how much flour she has, she'll be a little bit more stingy. If she knows exact, then she won't play it safe, and she'll give the appropriate amount. For Shmuel Amar Aser, Shmuel says, I'm sorry, that's not measuring for the sake of the food directly. That's measuring for the sake of challah, of separating challah, and I'm not going to allow you to measure for that purpose. Hatana de Shmuel mutter. 1 minute. How could Shmuel say it's forbidden? There's a brighter thought from the yeshiva of Shmuel that says it's permissible. So Amar Bai, Hashtadamar Shmuel Aser. Shmuel himself says forbidden. Hatana de Shmuel mutter, but the brighter from the house of Shmuel says it's permissible to measure out the exact amount of flour to separate challah. Halach l'maisa. So Shmuel halach l'maisa asa le'ashmuna. Shmuel is telling us the bottom line halacha, not necessarily the theoretical halacha. And Rashi says here it's another example of halacha ve'in morin kain. That in theory the halacha is that it's mutter to measure out flour for the sake of knowing exactly how to separate challah. But in practice, Shmuel would prefer that people not do it. Okay, one of these other differences between the theoretical halacha and the practical halacha. And then there's a whole question, how do we pass? Do we pass like Shmuel? Do we pass like Rav? Are you allowed to measure out flour? And I should say Tosfos has an interesting discussion, because Tosfos says we don't separate now like a certain amount of flour to give to the Kohen. We separate out, it's only symbolic, and we burn it, so there shouldn't be an allowance to know exactly how much, because it's not going to affect the size that you separate out. Except, says Tosfos, we do have to know how much flour we're using. Why do we have to know how much flour you were using for a challah purpose? Not to determine how much challah to separate, but to determine whether you need to separate challah. And say, okay, we'll just separate with the suffix. But do I make a bracha or not? So Tosfos has a discussion, can you measure the exact amount of flour so that you'll know whether or not you have to make a bracha, rather than not making a bracha because you're playing it safe? And in the end he says, no, just be either overly generous so you have no doubt that you're obligated with a bracha, or make it clearly in smaller quantities so you have no doubt that you're exempt. But he has a similar question about measuring flour to determine whether you can make a bracha. But the bigger question I would say for us is the case of the cook of the chef, and are we allowed to use tablespoons and teaspoons on Yontif in our own cooking? Yes.
Sorry, what was the case of shelo yakdiach tavshil?
Yakdiach means spoil, but it could mean burn, but it doesn't literally mean burn. It means over spice, so it's inedible. Okay, so it means ruin. Ruin. Okay.
To make it too spicy.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis taught, Ein shoning kemach b'yom tov. You cannot double sift flour on Yom Tov. If it's already been sifted, you can't sift it again. Now again, sifting is normally one of those things that takes place out in the field or in the pre-processing stage, but maybe, some people, even after they bring flour home, they want to sift it again to make it extra pure. So maybe it's allowed because it's more like this kitchen-based type of a thing. So the Gemara says it's not allowed. Mishum Rabbi Papi's Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Amru, shown him, yes, you can resift your flour on Yontif. V'shavim, and everybody agrees, Shimnafel l'toch tzrur o kisam, if it actually became impurified, like a rock or a little, piece of wood fell into it, a chip of wood, she's shown him that then you could resift it. Okay, Tani Tana Kamei de Ravina, so a Tana brought in the presence of Ravina, Ein Shanim Kenach B'Yom Tov. You cannot re-sift your flour. Avol Nafel Tzuro Kisam Bor B'Yado. But if a little piece of wood or a rock fell into it, then don't re-sift it, but pick it out with your hands. Amar Lei, he said back to him, Kosh came to Usher. No, that makes it worse if you pick it out with your hand. The Havilei Kiborer. That's more like a clear act of borer. Now, of course, you would say sifting isn't an act of borer. I mean, sifting, the whole point is to separate it out. So Rashi tries to figure that out, and Rashi says that he says visually, when you sift, right, if you ever see somebody, I mean, some people in their kitchen re-sift the flour, it's not clear that anything is being separated. Once it's already sifted flour, it's, why is this person doing it? I don't know. Maybe it loosens it up or something. But it aerates it. There's not like a clear thing that's being taken out. But if you go specifically with your hand and pull it out, that's more that it's an act of borer. Now again, borer in certain contexts is allowed in Yom Tov, in a particular kitchen type of a context. And we had a whole mission before Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. So this gets to the issue about, is this like an uvda d'cho concern, or Rashi here says it's a malacha concern. But again, why is it a malacha? What exactly defines when these things are considered part of preparing food, and when does it define them as preparatory, which are not allowed? So here the Gemara says that in some cases when it is necessary you can do it, but maybe not with your hand. That makes it too obvious that you are doing borer. Darish Rava bar Rav Huna Zuti a Pitcha Dinarda. So Rava bar the son of the younger Rav Huna, the small Rav Huna, expounded by the opening of Narda, like the gates of Narda, whatever, the public square. Showed him kemach b'yantav. You can re-sift flour on yantav. Amalu Rav Nachman said to him, Puku v'amrulei la'aba. Go tell Abba, meaning my friend there. Shekilu tivosayach v'shadi achaziri. So take all of this very nice favor you did for us and throw it on the thorns. Meaning, you think you're wonderful. You're coming to the town and you're telling everybody you can re-sift your flour. Who needs you? Puk chazi kama muhulta hadmin benarda. Go look around and see how many sifters are circulating around Narda. Everybody knows that. Everybody re-sifts their flour on Yom Tov. Nobody needed your big chiddush that you come to tell us this. Okay, so here, not only before it said it's usher, not only it's saying mutter here, it's saying it's like patently obvious that it's mutter. Okay, Tvasayud Rav Yosef's wife, Nala Kimcha Agavat Mahulta. She re-sifted flour on Yom Tov, but she did it with a shinui. She used the back of the sifter, not the normal way. Amar La, so he said to her, Chazi, he says, it's all very nice you're being from, but pay attention, the Ana Rifta Mal Yasa Be'inan. I'd like to have nice bread. So meaning, it's very nice you're trying to be from, do it the normal way. I prefer that, I want my bread to be well sifted. Yeah, that is a problem. I know. And the previous also has been a little mean. Okay. So Rav Ashi's wife sifted flour on the back of the table, which maybe means that rather than into a normal vessel, it would not that she used that as her sifter, but that's what she used to catch the flour. Also doing some type of a shinoi. Rav Ashi, so Rav Ashi said, Hadi Dan, that of us, meaning my wife, Barte de Rami Bar Chama is the daughter of Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama Mara de Uvdave. Mari Bar Chama was very from. If she hadn't seen this from the woman's house, meaning her mother's house, like this is the mimetic tradition, right? She would not have been doing it now that she's married to me. So here it ends by giving weight and legitimacy to saying we don't necessarily re-sift flour in the normal way. So once again, bringing up this question of what types of things are allowed for food if there are processes that normally take place, outside of the kitchen. Last Mishnah, let's end the parak. You can go to a storekeeper that you are familiar with. The reason it has to be familiar with is that he'll trust you to pay you up after Yom Tov. So before we were talking about the butcher, your friend. Now we're talking about the storekeeper. The Omerlo, and you say to him, Tainli beitzim ve'gozim b'minyan. Give me like a dozen eggs. Give me like 50 nuts. Okay? And you can mention the number of nuts and the number of eggs. Why? Because you don't only use number, when you are doing transactions. You'll say, I need 3 eggs for my, for this cake that I'm making. Or I need, I don't know if you'd say 50 nuts, but whatever. But giving a number is not necessarily make it more like a transaction. As opposed to weighing something and giving a weight to something, or giving like a cup's worth or 3 cups worth or whatever, that makes it more transactionary. This not so much, so it can look more like you're just borrowing it or he's giving it to you. It doesn't necessarily look as much of a transaction. Let's take a look. Tana Rabbanan. So you can go to a shepherd that you're familiar with. You know, can you give me a sheep or a goat? Now you say give, but obviously you're going to pay him back. Okay, but that's allowed. You're not. It's not transactionary because again of the language that you're using. So you go to a butcher you're familiar with. Give me like one, leg, or give me a thigh. And again, you mention a piece, but you don't mention a weight, and you certainly don't mention money. And you can go to a fattener, meaning somebody who fattens up birds. The omerlo and say, give me a pigeon or give me a dove. Okay, and you just mention the number of objects, but not a size, not a weight. And by now he does mean a baker. And you say, I'd like a loaf of bread, 5 loaves of bread, or gluska achas, or a cake, but you don't weigh it, and you don't talk about money. The Eitzel Chenvonia Ragelatzo, or storekeeper, the Omerlon, you say, Tainli Esrin Beitin, give me 20 eggs, or Chamishim goes in 15 ups, Asara Farsikin, 10, what's enough Farsik? Quince? Peaches?
Our farsake is in modern Hebrew a peach.
Okay, the Chamisha Rimonim and 5 pomegranates. The Esrog Echad, fascinating what this reveals about how people would use and the quantities people would do. 1 Esrog. So they would use Esrogim during, is it Sukkos? Does the storekeeper have Esrogim? Is that why we're talking about it? It is a Yantav. Anyway, so you can mention all these things. Don't just mention the exact weight. That's the way Rashi interprets this. Reb Shimon Eliezer Omer Uvachelu Yaskim Lo Skum Nekaf. Don't mention the exact cost of it. So don't talk about weights and cost, but you can talk about numbers, and that does not look transactionary. Okay, Hadron Alachin Sudden, and with that we end the third.
They're all open. All these shops are open.